The Sewol Ferry disaster on April 16, 2014, sent shockwaves around the world. Most passengers were high school students who had numerous chances to escape, but were inexplicably forced to stay on the ship, leading to 304 deaths. As more evidence surfaced, the public grew increasingly angry at the government's negligence and inaction. Some even suspected the involvement of cult sacrifices. In Danwon High School in South Korea, 325 students were set for a 4-day educational trip. They planned to depart from Incheon port and sail to Jeju Island. That evening, a fog advisory halted all departures. However, the ban was lifted later, and only one ship sailed out, the Sewol, carrying both passengers and cargo. Delaying the voyage would have caused significant losses. The Sewol, carrying 476 people, left Incheon port for Jeju Island on the evening of April 15th. Aboard were 325 students and teachers from Danwon High, eagerly anticipating their trip. The educational pressure is immense in South Korea, making this trip a rare break for the students. At 10 p.m., everyone was invited to a spectacular fireworks display on the deck. The night was lively, especially on the third floor's main hall where 2 Filipino singers performed. The next morning at about 8:48 a.m., a loud bang and shaking startled everyone on board. Initially, it seemed minor, but the ship soon began to tilt, and objects slid violently, injuring many. At this point, the first mate, Kang Won-sik, announced over the intercom to stay put, a message repeated over 10 times. At 8:52 a.m., a student named Choi Deokha sensed danger and dialed 119 for help, marking the first distress call from the Sewol. However, the operator, mistaking Choi for a crew member, asked for professional details like coordinates. Choi couldn't answer, and soon the call dropped. 3 minutes later, First Mate Kang finally made an external distress call, but by then, 8 minutes had elapsed since the ship started tilting. For the next 12 minutes, the crew did nothing but wait for rescue. During this time, the captain made 5 calls to their company, yet there was no discussion of evacuating the students. At 9:07 a.m., a nearby vessel, the Dura, noticed the capsized Sewol and approached. The Sewol was drifting with the current, and no one appeared on deck, making the situation unclear and preventing Dura from getting too close. At 9:10 a.m., the Jindo Port Control Center inquired if the passengers had boarded life rafts. The first mate responded that there were too many people for the rafts to accommodate. However, the Sewol had 44 lifeboats and 4 marine evacuation systems, enough for 2,100 people to escape. At 9:23 a.m., the center contacted again, informing them that Dura was nearby and could assist if they started evacuating. The Sewol crew claimed their broadcast system was down, and they couldn't alert the passengers. The control center urged them to inform the passengers manually, but the first mate questioned if immediate rescue was guaranteed upon evacuation, to which they confirmed it was. Yet 5 minutes later, no one had emerged from the Sewol, and the announcement to stay put continued. From 9:32 a.m., several civilian vessels arrived and began deploying lifeboats under the control center's coordination. Marine Police Vessel 123 and helicopter B-512 also reached the scene but didn't directly contact the Sewol. The passengers, not hearing any directive, dared not leave. The whole rescue process appeared bizarre as vessels hovered around the Sewol, helplessly watching the ship slowly tilt further. At 9:37 a.m., Captain Lee Jun-seok reported the tilting status to the control center for the last time before ordering the crew to evacuate. And shortly after, 3 Coast Guards approached the Sewol in a small dinghy. Within 10 minutes, they reached the deck and rescued the first group of survivors, who were not passengers but Captain Lee and 8 crew members. The captain and crew, upon being rescued, did not ask the Coast Guards to save the passengers. They were only concerned with their own escape. Even the intercom in the cabin, which could have been used to evacuate the students, was not turned off. The Coast Guards, after rescuing the crew, never approached the Sewol again. They merely circled around, watching it slowly sink. At 10:04 a.m., Park Seung-gi, an officer in the South Sea Fisheries Management Team, learned about the Sewol incident. He immediately headed to the scene with a law enforcement recorder. Upon arrival, he noticed several vessels gathered but none engaging in rescue, assuming there was a problem since the Coast Guard vessels were also not approaching. However, Park directly sailed to the Sewol's stern, boarded the deck, and successfully rescued 28 people with his colleagues. His fisheries vessel, with its warning lights flashing, led the nearby civilian fishing boats believed that a government-ordered rescue operation had started. Encouraged by this, they approached the Sewol and successfully rescued another 120 people within 15 minutes, playing a crucial role in the rescue efforts. At 10:17 a.m., the Sewol completely capsized, leaving only its starboard side above water. Inside, students finally realized they couldn't rely on the broadcasts anymore, but for most, escape was no longer possible. The cabin doors wouldn't open due to the water pressure, and only the sounds of the rushing sea and desperate screams could be heard. Students frantically banged on the windows, crying. Some sent final messages to their families, like one girl who apologized to her sister for past disagreements and asked her to tell their mother, "I love you." Another boy messaged his mother saying, "Mom, it looks like I won't have another chance. I'll say it now, I love you." At 11:18 a.m., only the blue bow of the Sewol remained above the water. By 10 a.m. on the day of the incident, South Korean President Park Geun-hye had already received reports of the accident, but her whereabouts were unknown afterwards. At 11 a.m., when the Sewol was nearly submerged, the Central Disaster Safety Countermeasures Office reported to Cheongwa-dae, South Korea's presidential residence, that there were no casualties. South Korea's KBS broadcasted this at 11:01 a.m., leading some parents to believe all children had been rescued. They tried to contact their children's phones, receiving no replies. Gradually, news came that many children were still trapped inside the submerged ship, exposing the false reports. Public opinion rapidly deteriorated. Misunderstandings about the severity of the accident led civilian rescue groups not to immediately bring equipment for aid. Amid the chaos, the Naval Accident Rescue Team arrived at the scene at 12:04 p.m. However, they lacked diving equipment and could not conduct underwater rescues, merely waiting around the Sewol. At 1:42 p.m., the Marine Police's deep-sea diving special rescue team finally arrived, but tidal conditions prevented the launch of rescue operations. At 5:15 p.m., President Park Geun-hye, missing for 7 hours, finally appeared, astonished at the lack of progress in the rescue efforts. She even asked, "I heard the students were wearing life jackets. Is it that hard to find them?" Clearly, she was uninformed about the detailed circumstances and progress of the rescue. The underwater search operation began at 6 p.m., involving only 4 divers for a 10-minute duration, rescuing no one. The divers merely knocked on the Sewol's hull, checking for any response from inside. Despite government claims of deploying 118 Coast Guards and 42 Navy personnel, photos sent from the scene exposed these lies, leading parents to completely lose trust in the government. Throughout the evening, Coast Guards controlled the site, preventing any unauthorized approaches for diving rescues. Officially, over 500 divers were claimed to have participated, but parents saw no divers around the Sewol. Thus, the crucial golden hours for rescue were wasted. Rescue operations officially commenced 3 days later, on April 19th, involving Coast Guards, Navy personnel, and civilian divers. That day, 49 bodies were recovered, with search efforts continuing until November 11th, 209 days after the Sewol disaster, when they were officially concluded. Ultimately, 172 individuals were rescued, 296 were confirmed dead, and 8 remained unaccounted for, marking it the worst ferry disaster in South Korea since 1971. So, what exactly caused the Sewol to capsize? 3 main theories are widely discussed. 1. Overloading. Originally a Japanese cargo ship, the Sewol was purchased by the South Korean Cheonghaejin Marine Company in 2012 and modified for combined passenger and cargo transport. To accommodate more passengers, the uppermost deck was converted into passenger rooms and the original second-class cabins into cargo holds, raising the passenger capacity to 960. This shift raised the ship's center of gravity by half a meter, disrupting its balance. The modifications violated South Korean regulations. On the day of the disaster, the Sewol was carrying 2,142 tons of cargo, well over its legal limit of 987 tons, and had discharged 900 tons of ballast water, further destabilizing the vessel. The capsize occurred during a turn, and the cargo was unsecured. As a result, it slid to one side during the capsize, further exacerbating the ship's tilt and leading to the tragedy. 2. Crew mismanagement. Every ship transmits AIS information akin to eyes on the sea, which helps vessels see where others are and what they're doing. In 2018, South Korean director Kim Ji-young released the documentary Intention, starting from the AIS information's underlying code of the Sewol, proving the South Korean government's published AIS data was falsified. After restoring the real information, it was revealed that the Sewol had made several unreasonable rapid changes in direction before capsizing, and during the last significant turn, the left anchor was dropped, applying an external force to the turning Sewol, ultimately causing the capsize. The reasons behind the crew's repeated changes in direction and the anchor drop remain unknown. 3. Cult sacrifice theory. On the day of the disaster, then-President Park Geun-hye received reports by 10 a.m., but did not appear until after 5 p.m. Where was she during those 7 hours? One theory suggests she was getting her hair done. confirmed by a summoned hairstylist to Cheonghwa Dai, which was infuriating enough for the public. However, a conspiracy theory proposes she attended a cult ceremony. Choi Soon-sil, Park's confidant, entered Cheonghwa-dae for a mysterious meeting at 2 p.m. that day. Choi's father, Choi Taemin, was the leader of the Church of Eternal Life, a South Korean cult combining elements of Buddhism, Christianity, and traditional Korean shamanism. He had been a spiritual support for Park after her father's assassination, even claiming they were spiritually married. Choi Taemin, who passed away in 1994, had allegedly prophesied about his reincarnation 20 years later, coinciding with the Sewol disaster in 2014. Additionally, Choi Taemin's death anniversary is the 21st day of the third lunar month, just a few days apart from the Sewol's sinking on the 17th day of the third lunar month. On the other hand, the Sewol's owning company, Cheonghaejin Marine Company, was headed by Yoo Byung-eun, founder of the Salvation Sect, a new religious movement linked to the 1987 Odaeang mass suicide. In 1992, the Korean Presbyterian Church declared it a cult. The Sewol, whose name in Korean means beyond the worldly, has strong religious connotations. Captain Lee Jun-seok of the Sewol was a last-minute replacement after the original captain, who reported safety issues needing repairs, was suspended and replaced. After the disaster, due to allegations of embezzlement and money laundering, South Korean police launched a massive manhunt for Yoo Byung-eun, eventually finding a severely decomposed body identified as Yoo's through DNA testing. However, the body had decayed to mostly bones within just over 10 days, raising doubts among many Koreans. Combining all these suspicions, some South Koreans speculated that President Park Geun-hye attended a cult ceremony during her 7-hour disappearance on the day of the disaster. Whether true or not, it's undeniable that the Park administration, for some reason, did not promptly initiate rescue operations, leading to over 300 people waiting vainly at sea for nearly 2 hours before perishing. Following the incident, Park's approval rating plummeted from 71% to 40%. Later, the scandal involving Choi Soon-sil's interference in government was exposed, leading to Park becoming South Korea's first president to be impeached and removed from office, and eventually sentenced to 20 years in prison. More than a year after the Sewol disaster, in November 2015, the final court hearing took place in South Korea. Out of 399 individuals investigated, 178 were detained and charged, but only 53 were found guilty in the final verdict. Sewol's captain Lee Jun-seok was convicted of intentional homicide among other charges and received a life sentence. The remaining 15 rescued crew members were sentenced to terms ranging from 18 months to 12 years, with first mate Kang Won-sik receiving a 12-year sentence for repeatedly broadcasting the instruction to keep students in place. 2 years after the incident, in 2016, Danwon High School held a special graduation ceremony for the students who would have graduated that year. Each desk was adorned with flowers and the textbooks of those who had perished, commemorating the lives lost at such a young age.